I hear that many of you have mother-in-law troubles. Some of you have some horrible stories where you had been downright abused by your mother-in-law. I feel horrible for you guys and can relate to your pain to some extent. Let me introduce myself to you. I am Autumn. I'm a dedicated housewife and have an amazing husband, Dan. We dated straight after college and married after 3 years. The first few months of our marriage were fine except for the occasional interference from his mom, Kelly. We had no idea back then that she would become a bigger problem for me than I would ever imagine. Before I get into what happened, I think you deserve to have a peek into the backstory. It will be helpful for you to understand exactly what kind of a woman my mother-in-law is. When I first met Kelly, I thought that she was downright hostile towards me. I wasn't expecting that at all, since she had always pestered Dan to introduce us. I genuinely thought that she was happy to see Dan in a great relationship. But I was wrong. She only wanted to meet me so that she could intimidate me. That day, when Dan took a bathroom break, she gave me one of her ugliest looks and said, "You must be thinking how important you are to Dan. You think you are a good girlfriend and will be a good wife. Well, let me tell you that you can't. You will never be as good as me." "I'm not trying to compete with you, Kelly. You raised Dan single-handedly after his dad left. I have a lot of respect for you, actually." "Good. You are going to need that once you marry Dan. Don't think I would allow you to draw my son away from me. Once you marry him, you will only be a personal maid to him and me. I will make sure of that. I hope you keep that in mind before building castles in the air." I was too shocked to grace her with a reply. The way she said those things was downright vile. By the time I was able to recover from the shock, Dan was back at the table. I observed how effortlessly the mask slipped back on his mom. No, she wasn't smiling fake or being overly cheerful. She was being robotic, but didn't give me any nasty looks while Dan was with us. That night, when I went back home, I knew one thing for sure: Kelly is going to be a problem in my life. Her behavior was outrageous, and it did put some fear into me. She said those things in secret, so I didn't know how to tell Dan. From what I saw, Dan loves his mother a lot and feels indebted to her for raising him. I guess it was actually Kelly's raising that made him think this way, so I wasn't sure Dan would believe me if I told him what happened. Like a stupid idiot, I kept quiet and took all the insults and jibes that Kelly threw at me in private. My only consolation was that Kelly lived separately from us and we were going to have our new place all to ourselves. After we got married for about 4 months, we ended up living in our new house alone. We had some really fun times and married life was treating me well. That was until Dan informed me that his mom would be moving in with us. I couldn't say no because the house belonged to him. Plus, I didn't think Dan would take it well if I had told him to abandon his mom. Apparently, Kelly told him that she had left her job and was about to be homeless. Once Kelly moved in with us, she made my life hell. She would constantly make me worm around the house and run errands for her. When I refused to do something, she would punish me as she pleased. One of the most common methods of her punishment would be throwing away the food I made for my meals. Then she would do stuff like pull my hair and grab my arm really strongly while I wasn't doing housework the way she wanted. After suffering for a few months, I decided to hint to Dan that his mom needed to leave. I said, "I don't know how to put this mildly, but your mom and I are not getting along at all. I don't think I can continue to live with her." "Don't be ridiculous, Autumn. You know that my mom has nowhere to go. She can be a bit strict, but you'll be able to adjust with her." "I tried my best, but she wouldn't budge, Dan. I'm getting tired of dealing with her." "I'm sorry, Autumn. I can't just kick my mom out onto the streets. If she was doing something drastically wrong, it would have been an option, but please just try to adjust and make things a little easier for me. I really don't want to choose between the two of you." I couldn't tell Dan what I was going through with Kelly. He didn't know why I desperately wanted her out of the house. I also didn't push the issue because I could understand Dan's point as well. He wanted to help out his mom. The problem was that he rarely saw anything wrong with her behavior. So proving Kelly's abuse would have been difficult. However, fate found a way. One day, while I was forced to clean the house, I noticed my fake flower pot looking a little weird. It took me a few moments to see the camera that was hiding between the leaves. It was one of those cheap things you buy on Amazon. I knew for a fact that it didn't belong to me or my husband, so there was only one explanation about who put it there. It had to be Kelly. I had no idea why she would do this, but I wanted to find out, so I pretended not to see the camera and cleaned beside the flower pot to avoid suspicion. I also kept thinking about the fact that the camera would be able to catch all the abuse that Kelly was putting me through, so I let it be. It was around 2 days later that Kelly finally revealed why she had planted a camera in my house. She had, very stupidly, declared in front of me and Dan, "I have something to confess, Dan. I hope you will forgive me for it." "What is it, Mom? Don't be so dramatic. I'm sure it can't be that bad." "It is controversial, Dan. I actually secretly put cameras in your house." "What? What are you saying, Mom? Why would you do that?" "I know you might be upset at me, but it was necessary. I needed to show you how incompetent and useless your wife is. I can't believe that you are still with her." "Mom, you are not making any sense. What is going on?" "You need to watch these videotapes and find out, Dan. These are the tapes from the cameras I set up. It was the only way to prove that Autumn was not the right wife for you. You need to watch this and do something about it, Dan." Kelly simply forwarded the video to Dan and demanded that he play the recording. I was sitting next to him and saw the entire thing. It had clear clips of Kelly pulling my hair and dumping my food when I didn't make what she wanted me to make. I was getting traumatized just looking at it again. Meanwhile, my husband watched the video in silence while my mother-in-law sat there smirking at me. I was a little skeptical about what my husband would say when he saw the video. I didn't know if he would take my side or his mom's side. Looking at Kelly's expression, I knew that she expected Dan to side with her. She thought that Dan would agree with her assessment of me and then kick me out as she had imagined. But she didn't know that she was in for a big surprise. Dan finished the video and sat in silence for a while. Kelly was still smirking at me, and I really didn't know what to think. Kelly was getting rather impatient and ended up saying, "So, what do you think, Dan?" "What do you want me to say?" "Well, you should do something. You can't let someone useless and incompetent like Autumn stay in this house. She is not worthy of being your wife. You should kick her out immediately." "Really, Mom? You think I would agree with you and kick my wife out? You know who I think should be out of the house? It's you, Mom." Kelly was taken aback when Dan said those words. In her head, she was sure that her precious son would take her side. But Dan showed her the shiny backbone that I had been wishing to see for a while. I guess after seeing those videos, he had finally realized that his mom was as problematic as I had made her out to be. He looked really stricken and equally angry. Kelly was now struggling to form words at his uncleaned reaction. "What are you talking about, Dan? Why would you kick me out? Your wife is the incompetent one in the house." "My wife is not incompetent, and you better stop saying that. The truth is that you are the one who needs to be kicked out. I really have no words left for you, Mom. How could you do this?" "Oh my God, Dan, what is wrong with you? Why are you turning this on me? I haven't done anything." "You haven't done anything, Mom? Are you saying that you didn't abuse my wife in her own home?" I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw that my husband had finally understood what his mom was up to. I was a little reluctant to tell him everything, so the camera did wonders for me. It literally highlighted my struggles with Kelly and showed Dan what a monster his mom was. However, Kelly wasn't having any of it. She threw a massive tantrum and said, "This is ridiculous, Dan. I'm trying to make sure Autumn fulfills her wifely duties, and this is how you treat me? Now you're calling me abusive?" "I am calling you abusive because that's what you are, Mom. These videos clearly show how you have harassed my poor wife day after day under my roof. Dan, you are not thinking straight. I can't believe that you would side with your wife on this. She has completely poisoned you against me. Now here is where I decided to speak up. I would not have her try to pin all the blame on me again. I was tired of her victimizing herself and blaming me every time Dan tried to be harsh with her. I've had enough, so I said, "Why are you trying to pin the blame on me, Kelly? I didn't tell Dan anything. You were the one who decided to violate my privacy and install secret cameras in my house. You literally ambushed us with the footage, Kelly." Oh, God, it almost didn't cross my mind how grossly you have violated the sanctity of our home. How do you even think that this is okay, Autumn? Why didn't you stop her from doing this? I never knew about the cameras, Dan. I won't lie, but I did find them today when I was cleaning the house on Kelly's command. I spotted the camera, but pretended to ignore it so that Kelly wouldn't suspect anything. Will you look at that, Dan? This is all her doing. She intentionally set me up so that I will appear to be an abusive mother-in-law. There it was again. Kelly absolutely won't stop blaming me for everything. I could have easily lied and said that I didn't find out about the camera, but I had enough integrity to speak the truth. Kelly had no such thing and was adamant about shifting blame to save herself. Now that she didn't get her dream reaction from her son, she was trying to victimize herself to escape trouble. But Dan also had enough of her antics. He said, "Are you telling me that my wife somehow made you abuse her? God, that is exactly what an abusive person would say. Did my wife tell you to throw away her food and hit her? I only did that because she didn't do what I asked her to. I am the head of the house and she should be listening to me. You know she was going to make a meal that you don't like. She was being a bad wife again by doing something you don't like. I dumped the food to teach her a lesson." What on earth is wrong with you, Mom? My wife isn't here to cater to all my needs and change her life according to my preferences. She's my wife. She's not a maid. Also, what gave you the right to call yourself the head of the house? Of course I'm the head of the house, Dan. I'm your mother, after all. It's my duty to make sure your wife stays in line. You are the one who needed to stay in your line, Mom. I can't believe how you have antagonized my poor wife in these 2 days. Who knows how much you had tortured her all this while. I really should have listened to you, Autumn. I am so sorry. Kelly was shocked to see that her son was actually saying sorry to me instead of her. That drove her over the edge. She started to turn on the waterworks since her efforts at victimizing herself weren't working that well. Kelly thought that her tears would melt away Dan's anger immediately. Well, it did most of the time, but my God, my husband was extremely angry at that moment. He looked downright scary and didn't hesitate to put his mom back in her place. He said to her, "I can't believe that you are crying because I gave my wife a well-deserved apology. My son has changed so much, it's hurting me. You are hurting me, Dan. I can't believe you would pick Autumn's side over me. I can't believe you would apologize to her instead of me." "You haven't done anything to deserve my sympathy or apology, Mom. I know well enough what you were trying to do. Trust me. Victimizing yourself won't work this time. I have had enough. I have absolutely no respect in this house any more. I guess you'll be happier if I move out. I can see that I am unwanted here. My son doesn't want me in his house any more. Fine, I will leave. You can say goodbye to your mom forever." "You're right about that, Mom. I don't want you in my house any more. Not after everything you have done. Good thing that you have decided to move, because I was going to suggest that. Actually, I was going to demand that from you." All of Kelly's plans were getting spoiled. One by one, Dan was destroying all of Kelly's manipulative tactics and had finally asked her to move out of our home. When Kelly talked about leaving, it was actually meant to be a threat. She had expected Dan to embrace her and beg her to stay or something. Dan was so deep in his responsibility towards his mom that he would have done that if not for the video evidence. I was happy to see that once he had confirmation about how horrible his mom was, he was willing to kick her out. But Kelly was shell-shocked by his reactions. She looked at him in disbelief and said, "What, you want me to move out?" What did you think, Mom? Did you expect me to beg you to stay? Yeah, I won't be doing any of that, so don't hold your breath. You would really kick me out and choose your stupid wife over me? You mean that will I kick out my abusive mom to make sure my wife is safe in her own house? Yes, I will do that in a heartbeat. How could you even say that, Dan? I'm your mother. You cannot kick me out for a stupid girl like Autumn. My wife is not stupid, but you definitely were if you had expected me to side with you after watching this video. I don't know in what world you thought doing this was okay. I'm honestly disgusted with you. I want nothing to do with you right now. You are really going to kick me out? Yes. I expect you to leave my house by the end of this month. I will draw up an eviction notice to make things easier. I won't have you in my house anymore. But where will I go, Dan? I have no place to go. I'll be homeless if you kick me out. You should have thought about that before treating your own daughter-in-law so horribly. I can't believe that you still haven't apologized to her for what you did. Kelly was now starting to realize the gravity of her situation. Dan was serious and wanted her out as soon as possible. He looked really angry and didn't even go to comfort his mom when she cried tears of sorrow. Instead, he reminded her that I deserve an apology from her. Now, Kelly would have died before she had offered me an apology, but she understood that she was on thin ice, so she tearfully said, Okay, I get it, Dan. I guess I'll have to apologize to Autumn now for trying to help you. Fine, if that's what it would take to make things normal, I will do it. Autumn, I'm sorry for what I did to you. How dare you think I would accept this ridiculous non-apology of yours? It's not even genuine. If it was, I would still never forgive you. I will never forget the things you put me through. Why are you being so difficult, Autumn? I was only trying to help you be a better wife. It's not my fault that you are too sensitive to criticisms and a little bit of discipline. Believe me, Kelly, you are only making your case worse. I don't even want to hear you speak right now. If you stay in this house, I will have to leave. See, Dan, I already apologized to Autumn, but she is being difficult on purpose. You have to see that I am not the problem here. She is the problem. Please don't throw me out because of this. The victim blaming on Kelly's part was never ending. I was still wearily waiting for Dan to give in to his mom's sentimentalities. This time I was determined to leave him if he didn't stand up for me. It would have broken my heart, but I needed to protect myself and walk away before it's too late. But I didn't have to do it because Dan was all in for standing up against his mother. He was spectacular in defending me and taking necessary actions to make sure his mom didn't get away with her antics. He said, "That was the worst apology I have ever heard in my life, Mom. You don't get leeway just because you are my mom. You are somehow still defending your horrible behavior for nothing. I'm done with you. Just leave. Don't come back." No, Dan. Please don't say that. Okay, I'll try to be better and understand. I will treat Autumn like my own daughter now. I'm not really interested in that, Kelly, so it's going to be a hard pass for me. Go find some other victim because I won't be one anymore. I will absolutely not have my wife leave me over you, Mom. The fact that you were being abusive is just the cherry on top. I have had enough of your talking. I will prepare an eviction notice so that you know I'm serious. I want you out by this month. Hearing that, Kelly broke down in a storm of tears. She was crying like an animal and constantly begging us for forgiveness. She had realized a little too late that her own actions would end up coming back to haunt her. Her plan to throw me out of the house failed so miserably that she ended up being the one who was getting kicked out. She remained on the floor, a crying mess, while Dan and I retreated to our bedroom. Once we were in our bedroom, Dan actually looked at me with the saddest eyes I have ever seen on him. I had never seen him so broken before and wished that I didn't ever get to see this again. I could tell the day's events absolutely drained him. He ended up hugging me and said, "I'm so sorry I didn't take your words seriously, Autumn. I really should have done some investigation and found out what was going on." It's okay, Dan. I never did give you the full story, so I understand why you kept dismissing me. I also get it that you wanted to take care of your mom. Why didn't you tell me everything, Autumn? I swear I would have kicked her out once I had known that she was abusing you. There are several reasons for that, Dan. I thought that I could handle her on my own. I thought you loved your mother and all these truths would have hurt you. Plus, I didn't have any concrete evidence of what she was doing. Well, I'm not feeling very loving towards her right now. If you ever find yourself in this situation again, promise me you will tell me everything. I will not let you be abused by anyone. As for my mom, I was serious about what I said. I will be kicking her out for good. I am going to protect you at all costs. I was so happy to hear my husband say that he would protect me. When he told me that he would really kick out his mom, the decision was sealed. He was going to go through with it. I was finally starting to have some hope in my life, and I was praying to God that my bad days had ended on that day. All I had to do was wait and watch justice play out for me. Kelly was going to get her karma. Dan ended up going to a lawyer and getting an eviction notice the very next day. Kelly was trying to ignore what happened the other night and was acting super sweet towards both of us. However, I knew that it was all a front since she didn't want to get kicked out. I was still wary of being around Kelly, so Dan ended up inviting my sister over to stay with me for a month till Kelly had moved out. He didn't trust his mom not to hurt me when we went off to work. When he returned from work that day, he had the eviction papers in his hands. It was definitely my best day ever. I will give you only a brief version of what happened after Kelly was given the eviction notice. She went into full tantrum mode and did everything she could think of. She screamed, cried, threatened, begged, and even called up family members for help. Well, very few people ended up taking her side. Even from them, many pulled back from her when they were shown the evidence of what she did to me. So it's safe to say that her own family is pretty disgusted with her antics, and, very unsurprisingly, no one was willing to take her in. Since Dan refused to give her any money, Kelly ended up crashing at her sister's place for a while. She later had to get a job because her sister wouldn't have her mooching off her. They had a strong bond, but being around each other 24/7 has started to affect their relationship as well. We haven't made any contact, so Dan does get some crying calls from Kelly about how horrible her life was. She has begged to come back several times, but has been told in no uncertain terms that it won't be happening. As for me and Dan, we have joined therapy to figure out our problems in the marriage and develop better communication. It's been a year and we have made a lot of progress. Honestly, life is good, and for now I can live stress-free in my house.